Hi everyone. This last video series is going to focus on the motivation unit, and that will correspond with modules 14, 15, and 16 in the textbook. I sent out earlier a PowerPoint to go along with this unit. If you get a chance to print it out ahead of time before watching the series, that's always great. You can always pause this and print it out. But it's nice to be able to go along, even if you have it one on a computer and on your phone. Either way. Um, I also have your grades up to date, so if you're interested in finding out where you stand, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Um, Lastly, is I made a video yesterday or 2 days ago, I can't recall, probably a couple days ago, related to the final project. Hopefully you've corresponded with your partner and been able to kind of take a look at what you need to do and get started on that. If you have any questions about that, don't hesitate. But I also put a video on to kind of walk you through that process and kind of what I'm looking for. And I sent a couple other documents last week as well. So as I said, this video series is going to be focused on motivation. And one of the things that's important for us as teachers, probably the quintessential question for many teachers and parents, especially parents now that are working with their kids so often in their schooling, is how do we motivate our kids? How do we motivate students in the classroom, outside of the classroom? And you have to ask yourself, can any teacher, is a good teacher, can they motivate their students no matter what the environment? That's a tough question. I mean, I think initially everybody wants to just think, oh yeah, good teachers can always motivate their students. Well, as we'll find out tonight when we're talking about um, the ideas in the classroom and what we do as far as from a motivational standpoint, you're going to find there's a lot of give and take. Students bear some responsibility. Teachers certainly bear a lot of responsibility. But the idea, and we've talked about this in previous units, when you start talking about things like the self-fulfilling prophecy, if you come into teaching with the idea that motivation is more on the side of the students, that the students aren't motivated, and that there's nothing you can do because they're not motivated, or when they go home they don't have parents or family that are help motivating them, and you pass that responsibility over to the students. I think in some respects the teachers are going to be impacted by that, like I said, self-fulfilling prophecy, where they've already given into the idea that, hey, there's just only so much I can do. And if they can't become motivated, then what am I supposed to do? Well, when you give up early, you set low expectations, you'll find out just how important that is to the students and to yourself as well. So when we start talking about motivation, what is motivation? You can play a little word association game, start coming up with words, quick words, words synonymous with motivation. You hear things like enthusiastic, that they're driven, that they have energy, that they are willing to work hard, that students listen, teachers are approachable. You start thinking about, what does it mean to motivate? Now, when we start talking about motivation, we often think of that force that someone has inside of them, or that teacher or that student or that coach, something that drives them, that energizes them, directs them toward a particular behavior or towards a particular goal. Well, not everybody has the same goals. Not everybody's going to have the same interest level. Not everybody's going to have the same desire for what it is that they're doing. So then what do we do as teachers? Now, if you get a minute, either if you have your PowerPoint with you or you get a chance to pause it and take a look at it, I have a few comic strips in there that present motivational issues. The first one is of a pirate. And the pirate says, is screaming at the top of his lungs, the floggings will continue until morale improves. Now, obviously it's meant to be ironic and hopefully get a chuckle out of people. But the idea is the floggings will continue until morale improves. Now, at first, floggings, we're talking about a beatings, things that you'd see on a ship. You get a flogging if you're not following orders, et cetera, et cetera. So, what does that mean exactly? What are they trying to say? Well, in the comic strip, they're saying that in order to get you to improve your morale, we're going to threaten you with a beating. Now, everybody's gonna, laugh and say, like, yeah, that's gonna happen, right? Well, think about that. How many times have you had a teacher or a coach or a parent even? Heck, I can remember growing up, you want something to cry about? I'll give you something about cry about, what's that mean? So the idea is they're saying, be quiet, stop crying, and that's the way that they're going to motivate you. With the idea of fear. Same thing with the coaches, the teachers. This idea that we take a stance or a position that we're so threatening or so intimidating that we'll get you to do what we want you to do. Now, some people will say, well, it works. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, but at what cost? Do you want to be that coach or that teacher or that director of a band that's constantly threatening their students to abide by their rules, to do what they say? That's their motivational technique. Pretty soon, kids quit playing the sport. Kids give up on band. Kids give up on whatever it is. And so the idea is that as silly as it sounds, we still have a lot of teachers, a lot of parents, a lot of coaches that really rely heavily on this idea of intimidation or fear to to motivate our students. Probably not very successful in the long run. Has usefulness for some students, for some players, but what are you willing to give up or lose in that approach? Then I have a couple other ones, and one of them reads says, "Oh, here we go again. Here we go again. Another meeting, another long meeting, 8-month long meeting of the school board." So a student is sitting inside of the classroom, and all they're thinking about is, "Here we go again. We're going to be sitting here for 8 months, going through the same old, same old, same old." Students think about it like that. When you present yourself to the class and you start teaching, and all the students hear is this monotone uh, inability to develop rapport with the kids, to interest them, to arouse curiosity. They just see it as a place that they have to go, something that they have to get through. And that's not very motivational. The last one I have is a comic strip, and I'm not going to read the whole comic strip here. You can take a look at it. But anyway, kid's sitting in his locker, and he's really angry at all the work that he's got to do, and he's complaining to his friends. We've got all this work to do. We got history, we got English, we got math, and all of these projects. And, if the teachers got their acts together and they all talk to each other, we could figure out a better way of doing this. But no, they all got to get it done right now, and if we don't get anything done, it's their fault. And as they're walking out to the baseball field, about ready to go play, they're complaining that if they don't get anything done, it's the teacher's fault. Now, it's kind of funny because we're all guilty of that. We all want to point the finger at our teacher, and we want to say, well, the reason I didn't get this done was because this. The reason I didn't get this done. How many times have you sat up and watched 6 episodes on Netflix and didn't get your work done? Okay? I'm guilty, It's like, what the heck? I start off at like 10 o'clock. I think I'm going to watch a couple episodes. Next thing you know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking, what the heck am I doing? Still up. I'm still cranking out these episodes of Netflix or whatever it is, right? And that happens to a lot of us. That happens to the kids. But they got to take responsibility for that too. I can't sit there and pass that off on the teachers when I as a student push this thing off 3 weeks. No, they have responsibility. So when we start talking about motivation, we have to understand, what are the students thinking? What part do they play in this process? What responsibility do they have? And we as teachers, we really can facilitate that if we have a plan going into it, right? So having said that, one of the things that when we start talking about motivation is we have to take a look at, in our classrooms, How does motivation impact learning and behavior? Now, I have a chart that kind of outlines or follows through a number of different ways. But motivation is not simply, did I give them the energy or the interest or the direction to follow through in a set of goals? Well, that's part of it. That's kind of what we think of when we think of motivation. But the truth is that motivation has a lot of variable, a lot of different varying effects on our students. One of is we started thinking about motivation. It's directly tied to goals. Okay, motivation to complete something, motivation to get something done, a motivation to be able to go somewhere, a motivation to whatever it might be. Goal directed behaviors. And what we realize is that we as teachers, can facilitate students' goal directed behaviors. And when the students have goals and are directed in that fashion, okay, that leads to enhanced performance. Students with goals do better than students without goals. And so we play a part in that. Okay. We know that motivation also influences students' effort and their energy. All right. Sometimes it's really easy. Students are self-directed. They're very interested in a topic and they take it off on themselves. They have a lot of effort and energy. Well, that effort and energy oftentimes translates into better performances than dragging your feet and procrastinating. We also know that motivation. I can't read my own writing there. Motivation also helps our students to initiate activities. The idea is that if we provide them some direction, if we provide them some encouragement, what we can do is oftentimes is help them to get a jump start on a particular activity. We also know that students that are motivated are more likely to persist with activities. Persistence in the activity also leads to enhanced performance. Now, one of the things is that we realize that motivation within our students is going to also influence their information processing, which obviously helps them perform better in the classroom. But what does that mean exactly, information processing? Well, when students are motivated, they tend to pay attention more. They focus on what is the task at hand. They look at the things that they need to accomplish in order to meet their goal. So the idea is that information processing is enhanced because they are, one, paying attention, but two, they're taking a look at the consequences or the results of their actions and using them in a meaningful way to help improve on their studying, their task, time management, etc. And lastly, we realize that motivation is also helpful to the students in reinforcing consequences. So what does that mean? That means that students, when they perform poorly on a test, those students who are unmotivated will ask a question like, "Why did that happen? What did I do? What do I need to improve upon?" So the idea is they take the consequences of a task and use them in benefit to improve their future performances. For instance, I'll give you a great example. When I was in one of my first semesters of my doctoral studies, I had a class in learning and instruction, and I remember I had a test coming up. It's okay. I had read all the material, was had all the material down pat, I thought. And then I got that first test back, and I realized I got like a C or a C minus on the exam. And I thought, man, I never thought I really knew that stuff. And what I realized was I had read all the material, had memorized all the vocabulary, but when I got to the test, the professor had required that we apply all the stuff. And the truth is, I didn't have a lot of classes in the past that asked for application. And as a result of that test, I had to retrain myself in how I studied. And so from that point on, I studied very differently than I did previously because I used the consequences of that performance in the test to shape the way that I study for future tasks or for future tests. That's what it means to use reinforcing consequences. And that's a motivated student will often use that as a strategy.